Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard Must Read Alaska, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. And we are the place for conservative news and content. And we're standing up strong for a good, strong America and a free Alaska. We're always in your corner, fighting for your constitutional rights. And there's a lot to fight for these days, and you are worth it. You can also find Must Read Alaska on our website at mustreadalaska.com and on Facebook, and Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and a whole bunch of the other social media sites that are out there. And we also have a column at Newsmax where I write every couple of weeks, a column called Must Read America. I hope you check that out. Thanks for tuning in, and hello to John Quick, my co-host in Nikiski, wonderful Nikiski, where you guys have car fires and stuff going on. And tell me what's going on over there.
Well, we have dip netting season in full effect here on the Kenai River, as most folks know if they're in Palmer or Wasilla or Anchorage. They come down here and they do some fishing. And we had some folks come down last couple of days, and he was trying to get out of the mud right on the Kenai River and decided that he didn't need any help. He was going to just press on the gas and pray to God that his car would get unstuck. He unfortunately prayed to the wrong God, and his car blew up. And he must have had some little propane tanks or something in his car, because his car was burning for a good, 30 minutes. And every couple minutes there'd be an explosion or two. But the funniest part of the whole thing, now nobody was hurt, which is a good thing. But the funniest part of the whole thing is there's literally people, this is 20 feet away from the river, and there's people parked on either side of this guy, in front, left, right, center, down, backwards, and nobody bothers to even move any. They're going to keep fishing, really, and nobody really stopped to do anything. They too big of a fire to try to put out, and too little of an obstacle to deter them from not fishing, and so everybody just kept on doing what they were doing.
That was hilarious. I saw the video you posted on the Must Read Alaska Facebook page, and everybody's just like, okay, I got to go out and get my limit, and just let it burn out, because you don't want to try to what are you going to do? You're going to get a bucket and try to put it out. I mean, it's a roaring, raging, cinematic fire. I mean, it looked like it was out of a video, and I kind of think people might have wanted to move their vehicles away, because you don't know what was in his vehicle. If he had like bullets in there or something, they would have exploded. It would have been shrapnel everywhere. But people in Alaska are just like, well, okay, we just, we're going to have to haul that one off with a tow truck. But they were not going to stop dip netting. They were just going to keep on going. And I thought that was just only in Kenai, I think, is what. Anything else going on with the politics in Kenai? I know that, are they behaving on the river there? Are they leaving the fish carcasses everywhere? Or have they finally gotten the message that they need to leave no trace?
Oh no, they I don't know if they haven't got the message over the last 20 years. I don't know what's going to give them to, make them to be able to get the message. It's left in shambles every single year. Now, granted, it's probably, 5% of the people that leave 90% of the mess, right?
Yeah.
But it still gets left a mess every year. And the folks at the city of Kenai and volunteers are left to really pick up after everybody. And a lot of these folks, they come down for a 20-hour trip. They drive down. They don't stay in a hotel. They don't really eat anywhere because they take all their own food. Yeah. And we're not complaining about that on the Kenai, but God forbid you pick up after yourselves. That's all we ask.
Yeah, that's right. They aren't really helping the economics of the Kenai, because they're not staying in hotels. They're camping, and it's a turn and burn. You go down and get your fish, put them in the cooler, and head back. And it'd be nice if you just kind of brought your carcass to some place. I think there's disposal sites, or take them with you. And but just don't leave them there on the beach, because it just stinks to high heaven. Well, any other politics going on down there?
Not much. We're just gearing up to start school again. We got a brand new superintendent who seems to be open and receptive to at least hearing from conservatives, which I think that's a step in the right direction. the last superintendent refused to even have a meeting with the current mayor, let alone listen to any parents who didn't believe 100% of what he believed. And so I think we're going to be at a place this year where parents will put their kids for the most part back into school because masks will not be mandatory on the playground, during class, all that kind of stuff. So I think we'll see a more favorable, friendly administration, at least here on the peninsula. So I'm
I hope so. I hope so. You guys deserve it. And I was down there in Soldotna for a good part of last week. And let me tell you, the environment in Soldotna, Kenai, that area, those businesses have thrived because they were never shut down. I mean, they were shut down very briefly last spring when the governor was saying, we've got to get geared up with our personal protective equipment, and then we've got to make sure our hospitals have enough beds and ventilators. But it was a fairly brief period that he closed businesses down, anything that wasn't considered essential. And I don't know if there's even a single business down there that went out of business, but we'll be talking a little bit later today, if we have time, about the situation in Anchorage, where we're still seeing the calamitous effects of the business closures by the former Mayor Ethan Berkowitz, and then Austin Quinn Davidson. But before that, I want to remind everybody that it is the World Health Organization says that it's World Mask Week. And they want you to know that the right way to wear your mask is to make sure that you sanitize your hands before you touch it, that when you put it on, you've washed your hands, and then before you take it off, you wash your hands, that you dispose of it correctly, and that if you touch it anywhere on your mask, that you continue to sanitize your hands. And John, I don't know anybody who does that. The mask thing is it's just beyond ludicrous. People have never worn their masks correctly because that's not who we are. We aren't medical people. We're just trying to get by in our lives. And but the World Health Organization is still persisting. And we even have our own Surgeon General saying, it's okay if we have these local mask mandates that go back into effect. That'll be okay. And I know LA has started its mask mandate for all indoors starting last Saturday at 11:59 p.m. And boy, I tell you.
Did you hear what their sheriff said, though?
He's not going to enforce it.
He's not going to enforce it because why? Because it goes against science. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, at least the sheriff gets the science. Speaking of science, I have called it the coronavirus. I've called it the China virus. I've called it the Wuhan virus. It is the China virus. And that is just something that these folks who think that's racist need to get over. It is a location, not a race. It came from China. We need to acknowledge that. That is science. And all of our other viruses are named after places, including things like the Nile River or the Nile virus and the Lyme's disease, the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, that type of thing. But I just want to say that China started this virus and America finished it pretty much in 1 year. And the numbers really say that. I mean, I've been vaccinated, you have not. We're all making our personal choices. And this is a really good example, John. You and I have made personal choices. I decided, the age group that virus wants to kill. And I think I should go ahead and get the vaccine. I'll be the guinea pig. You could be the control group. Right?
Yep. And I think that it's a beautiful example of we can have a difference of opinion on this and still be friends and still work together and still banter back and forth. Just because somebody has the virus or wears a mask or whatever doesn't mean that you have to disavow or disown that person. You can still have community and have a difference of opinion. This is what the mainstream media wants you to think, is that the only way is their way and the only right way is their way. And if you do not go their way, you are wrong and should be ostracized and put on some island and, left with all the Trumpers or something. It's
the media is driving the wedge between people, and there is a natural kind of a wedge that could develop, and they're certainly driving it as hard as they can. But we won this thing. They rolled this virus out in December of 2019 approximately, although there's some evidence that it may have come out a little bit earlier than that, because they have an awful lot of Chinese that from Wuhan province that go to Italy and produce all their leather goods. By the way, all the leather goods in Italy are produced by these Chinese in these factories that you never see. That's not on the main path. And then, of course, Italy took a pretty big hit with the virus, and a lot of people died. But we are the greatest country in the history of the world. And I will tell you that I would never bet against the United States. We got a vaccine, and our President Trump, he wanted it out there, he wanted it fast, he wanted it ready to go, and he pushed them and said, "You will get that vaccine out there. Let's go. I'll lift all the limitations." And not all the vaccines have been perfect, but to me, the evidence shows that it has really made a big difference in reducing the numbers of deaths. Although we do have some breakthrough cases, I've heard about that. We all heard about that, but people aren't dying in the numbers they were before. But they brought they probably worked on that virus for 10 years in some lab, and they probably tinkered with this aspect and that aspect. So, oh, look, if we tinker with this little part of it, then it'll attack people in this way. And so they roll it out, and in 1 year we say, yeah, we got this. No other country in the history of the world has ever been able to achieve something like we've achieved. We really are the greatest country. And I was looking at some data from China. You really can't trust anything that is coming out of China in terms of information. Those guys will lie through the teeth. They'll kill as many of their own people as they need to kill for the greater goal of economic dominance in the world. They are still reporting to and through the World Health Organization that they have only had 119,698 cases of COVID. Now, tell me if that's credible. They've only had 5,916 deaths, they say, in all of China. And we know how many of those places are very congested. And I'm just going to say that in Alaska, we've had more than half of that number of cases. We've had almost 70,000. We're just close to about 100 cases away from having 70,000 cases. I mean, we've had more than half of the cases in Alaska that all of China is reporting. So I just got to say, you can't trust what the Chinese government says. This is not about the Chinese people. This is not about Chinese or Asian people as a race. It is about their government and the way that they operate. And they produce the weirdest virus that this world has ever seen. It attacks some people some way. It attacks other people, like their vascular response. It attacks people in their head, they brain fog. Other people have these long-term effects. You've never had the virus, so you don't know what it is like. But some people have died from pneumonia, just gurgled to death from this stuff. It is nasty, and I've had a family member die from it as well. But I'm saying,
the thing that makes the thing that I like to look at it through the common sense lens of Joe Blow that's just working a 9-to-5er and plugging away at his life, and I look at this as they're saying this is the world's deadliest virus. Now, AIDS has been around for 40 years, the virus. There's certain viruses that are in cancer that can kill people. There's other huge viruses out there that they have never found a vaccine for. And my common sense radar goes off and says, well, the world's deadliest virus pops up, and somehow we found a cure for it or a vaccine for it in less than a year. And, as I talk to the average Joe that lives in Nikiski, that's why they're not wanting to get a vaccine, because they don't trust it. They don't think that there's any way possible that somehow we haven't been able to find a cure for AIDS in 30 years, but in 9 months, we found a cure for the deadliest virus in the history of the world. And,
well, that's really interesting, because I was just looking at this YouGov poll that the Economist magazine did, and this supports what you're saying, which is 20% of Americans believe in the theory that microchips may have been planted inside these vaccines and that millions of people have gotten these microchips. Okay, 20% of Americans believe that. There's really no evidence to support that, but it shows you how suspicious people are of their government and of, really, quite honestly, the media, the mainstream media, which has pushed the fear narrative. All of this past year, they have been hammering us, saying we're all going to die. Millions of us are going to die, and we're going to be stacked up like cordwood in the morgues. And it just was such a fear narrative. And then what happened is none of that came about. I mean, the virus is apparently 99.9% survivable. And even though there really isn't any claim, evidence to support a claim that is for this sort of microchip theory, it's amazing that you've got 20% of Americans who think that. Now, most of those people who think that are probably Trump voters. Quite honestly, only 8% of in this poll, only 8% of the Biden voters really believe that that there's a microchip as part of it, and Trump voters, it's 29%. So that's kind of an interesting thing. You've got a lot of people. That's 75 million Americans who are Trump supporters who are pretty suspicious. I mean, in general, they're suspicious. Now, I don't think there's a microchip in the vaccine. I don't think we can manufacture microchips that fast. But isn't that interesting that that's where we're at? You were saying about people are suspicious that we have the worst virus the world has ever known. And then now we have the Delta variant. And of course, it's even worse. It's even more, 50% more contagious than the first one. People are getting worn out from this stuff. They're not seeing the reality of it. I mean, there are people I know today who are in the hospital. I mean, I know people who are in the hospital with COVID. I mean, it is a very serious illness, but people aren't buying the fear mongering from it, because you still have a survivability rate of, I don't know, 99.8%, something like that.
Yeah, and the one of the stats they can't hide, which I don't know if they've hit it now, but a couple months ago it wasn't hidden, was for the folks that go the extra layer and look into this, even more, the CDC numbers for deaths for seasonal flu have disappeared. They've went nowhere. Like literally, we've had no deaths for seasonal flu in the last 12 months.
Right.
Where historically we've I don't know if this is the correct number, but let's say historically we had 300,000 deaths a year or something like that. It went down to like 87 deaths for this seasonal flu year. And how the heck does that happen? The average guy, including myself, looks at that and says, listen, this could have just been the seasonal flu, for God's sake. You didn't have any seasonal flu deaths. You had a bunch of COVID deaths that were, I don't know, for the most part, possibly real. Tons of comorbidity in there. Somebody dies of falling off a building and he had COVID, they label it as a COVID death.
We're seeing the Wall Street Journal, we're seeing all the mainstream media putting out this Delta variant fear narrative that is actually just saying that all the hospitals are gearing up for a huge surge. But I saw some really interesting charts. I saw an interesting chart from Goldman Sachs Global Research, and they showed that the cases are going up, but the number of hospitalizations and fatalities is staying relatively flat. And so our medical teams are able to handle the cases better. Of course, they're not seeing as many people come into the hospitals who are elderly or with a lot of other comorbidities, because quite honestly, those people have been vaccinated already. I mean, when you get all your sick people and all your old people vaccinated, everybody else who's getting it, if they end up in the hospital, they have better odds, and the hospital does have room for them. Millions of people have survived this virus, and enough about COVID. We want to talk about some other things before we go, but I just wanted to mention that we really are a remarkable country. I don't really buy that there's been a conspiracy to infect us and then with something that we could then cure. But I do think the Chinese government is completely responsible for this virus, and I don't think we'll ever be holding that country accountable, because I tell you, they have moved ahead so quickly in the economic environment, and they've left us behind as we have struggled to keep up with this virus, and just the way we shut our economy down. We have got to get this economy back up and running, and so that's all I want to say about that. I wanted to talk about another thing, John, which is very sad up here in Anchorage. and that is the closure of the Bradley House restaurant, which is it's a landmark restaurant for if you live in anywhere in South Anchorage. It's a landmark restaurant, got a great deck and a little garden out there, the waterfall, and they've done such a lovely job on that place. It is a beautiful restaurant, and it's closing because the owner, Bernie Bradley, just could not take any more of the insecurity of not knowing if government would shut her down, open her up, shut her down. And with all the ups and downs of the past year, she said her workforce has just quit. I mean, they've all gone off to other businesses that are more stable. These guys would rather be greeters at Walmart or Costco, because at least they're not going to get their jobs taken away from them by the government every 6 weeks. And it was the shutdown that Austin Quinn Davidson did in December that was the final straw for her. She said, that's it. Nobody's, can't get people to come back to work. She tried raising their wages to, really high. It was super good base wage. Could not get people to come and work in the kitchen. Couldn't get them to come and work in the restaurant. She installed $100,000 worth of cough barriers between the bar and the clients, and put walls up between each booth. So just to kind of keep the air from moving around. Man, that woman, she did everything possible. And the assembly did not care. They said, you're a restaurant, you're closing down. I got to tell you, it's a really big blow, because we've had so many. If you drive around town, there are so many restaurants that are shut down. It was Sweet Basil, Table 6, Lamex, Marco T's pizzeria there, and now the Hard Rock Cafe left, and Bradley House. So we've really had a lot of suffering in our business community in Anchorage. Not so in the Mat-Su. Their businesses are all up and running, and not so in the Kenai where you are. Your businesses are doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but this is a very prime data-driven example of how elections can have consequences.
Well, that's for sure.
Anchorage elected a loony, liberal left guy that had more sex scandals than actual accomplishments. And this is what happens when you elect clowns that don't have any business running, a $300 million organization. And they will make choices to appease the left, and that usually includes not giving a care about your business or your family or your situation. And then you have a place like Kenai and Wasilla and Palmer who have different situations. They had mayors. They cared about businesses and cared about people's well-beings, and those businesses are thriving in a COVID world, and Anchorage's is not, unfortunately. I hope it gets back to it.
Yeah, we've taken such a big hit up here, but you're right. Ethan Bergowitz was probably the worst mayor in the history of Alaska that I can think of. I mean, this is a guy who last year at this very time, he was down there at the BLM protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, talking to people and giving his speech saying, I look out and I see a sea of revolutionaries and it makes my heart glad. I mean, what a panderer. And meanwhile, he's closing businesses, the people who are the job creators. And I heard something really interesting the other day. In the 6 years that he was in office there as the mayor, the city payroll increased by 99 people. So he was just packing on the people who worked for the city, just packing that payroll. And that's got to get unwound by this current mayor. And I'll be writing a little bit about that this week, I think. So what else is going on out in the world?
Well, one of the articles that I really enjoyed that you wrote, I think it was a couple of days ago, is why Alaska can't have nice things. And we're unfortunately at a place where, like you've said in the article, where you can't pool everybody in the same group, but the end result is that Alaska is in a no better place than they were the beginning of this legislative session 150 days ago. Other states have been able to pass significant amount of bills that are important to the folks that those people represent. Meanwhile, we've named some bridges and done some dedications, passed a horrible budget, and not been able to give it a permanent fund to folks. And people are just getting sick and tired of the cycle of somebody telling you one thing to get elected and then doing the exact opposite when they get into juvenile.
Yeah, that's so true. And unfortunately, with all that said, we still have a permanent fund which is got $81 billion in it, and we cannot figure out how to give people their permanent fund dividend. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of lawmakers who don't want to work with this governor and seem to want to work against him and don't want to provide any meaningful legislation at all, such as, how about a bill we finally saw Tom McKay. He did put a bill in to ban critical race theory as a curriculum item in our schools, that type of thing. And if you're going to start teaching revisionist history in our schools, that needs to not happen. Not in our publicly funded schools. That you can take up if you want to do your homeschool and do your critical race theory there, that's fine. But in our public schools, you need to be teaching kids our history, and in all of our history isn't good, but you're not going to be separating kids out and saying, all right, which one of you has got the privilege? Please sit in the corner. That is something that we shouldn't be doing. And he does have a bill up for that. But, other than that, we're not seeing a lot of substantive legislation out of this. We've got the Irene Weber Bridge. This is a woman who was in Cordova who didn't know how to put a capitalization on her first name. It's lowercase I, Irene. And so now she's got a bridge named after her. I mean, come on, people. We have some serious problems and in this state of getting our house in order. And that's all we can do. So I'm not too impressed. And I don't think most Alaskans are either. You see it in the comments. People are saying, yep.
We did that poll. We did a poll, I don't know, a week or so ago, and just asked a simple question. We didn't allude to any grading that we thought that deserved, but what grade would you give the state house and the state senate for this year's session? And literally, I would say, not even exaggerating, 95% of everybody that commented gave them an F or something worse than an F that they made up in the comment thread.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, listen, everybody, before we go, for the rest of the week, we're always going to be at mustreadalaska.com, or sign up for the newsletter and you'll get us there too. It's on the right-hand side of the page. You can just sign up for the newsletter in that little box, and drop your email in there. And we'd love to see you on Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the newsletter. Scott Levesque, our producer, I want to thank you for doing our show for us. And I know you have a great show coming up on Wednesday. Everybody needs to tune in to the Wednesday edition of the Must Read Alaska podcast. Scott's going to have a very special guest, and I know you're going to want to hear from her. If you're a supporter of Must Read Alaska, I just want to thank you so much. You make a huge difference in our ability to, just keep the mainstream media on its toes and tell the other side of the story. And we're going to stay here supporting the conservative side of the news. So your donate button is right there on the right-hand side. And thank you so much, everybody. Until next week, we're signing off from Somewhere in Alaska.